6 months. Seriously, it has been 6 months, almost to the day. You know, we're a couple days past the 6-month anniversary, but practically 6 months of the Nintendo Switch being on the market worldwide. And it is still, to this day, seeing shortages all over the world. Even despite the fact that just 2 weeks ago, Nintendo successfully was able to restock almost every major retailer in the same week with a bunch of stuff in the United States. Today, a lot of those retailers no longer have Switch units in stock. Now, it's interesting because also earlier today, Best Buy online restocked their online selling of both the neon and the gray Joy-Con versions of the Switch. And I'm sure by the time this video goes out, those will be sold out. And if you're actually interested on deals like that, I've been trying to update our Twitter and our Facebook page as quickly as I can when Nintendo Switch stock is available to purchase online, so our fans can get early access to it. So if you really want to stay up to date on that and stay up to date on any other happenings that happen at Nintendo Prime, obviously go follow our Twitter account or our Facebook account, whichever one tickles your fancy. I probably should use our Google Plus account a bit more since that's directly connected to YouTube, but whatever. Anyways, the Nintendo Switch has just had a hard time staying in stock, and we heard rumors way back when that a lot of the shortages were due to the fact that Nintendo's competing for parts like the NAND flash memory and even parts for their HD Rumble, and they were competing for these parts with companies like Apple. And obviously Apple is going to have massive contracts with several of the companies that Nintendo works with, and those contracts will probably take priority over Nintendo because the orders are just that much bigger for products like the new iPhone. So, fast forward, and Nintendo has never really talked about why exactly they're having a hard time meeting demand until now. Now we have confirmation of something I think many of us thought was happening, but we never knew. Japanese newspaper Meianchi in Japan, I totally butchered the name, asked Nintendo specifically why they're having shortages. And they actually said, it's been a half year since the Nintendo Switch launch. Why are the shortages still ongoing? And obviously this dealt specifically with Japan because they have they have lines to be in a lottery for a chance to spend money on a system. That's how crazy it is in Japan. Nintendo responded with this: "We have never expected the Nintendo Switch to sell this much. You have to understand, Nintendo doesn't own the factory making Nintendo Switch, as production is handled by another company in China. It's easy to increase the production capacity of the factory. The finished product needs to be delivered from the harbor to the rest of the world, and rushing shipping is an extremely difficult thing to do. We must also increase orders for parts that are made by many other different companies, and these are the same companies that also supply components for Apple's upcoming iPhone, data centers, and many other products. Because of this, it is difficult for these companies to guarantee timely delivery of our orders, hence production falls behind schedule." There you have it, straight from the horse's mouth. Nintendo just finally, after all this time, confirmed they are having shortages on the Nintendo Switch because the suppliers for the parts are not able to deliver the orders on time. Why? Because of the demand for Apple's new upcoming iPhone, because of the demand for data centers, and all the other contracts these companies who make the parts already have with businesses that are probably even bigger than Nintendo themselves. So, if you're mad at Nintendo over Nintendo Switch shortages, if you've been assuming that this Nintendo Switch shortage issue is fabricated by Nintendo, that they are, shorting it on purpose, like they potentially shorted the NES Classic and the SNES Classic on purpose, or potentially like they've shorted amiibo on purpose, you are wrong. Wrong. These situations are entirely separate, and I've been arguing this for months, so it's nice to see that, I don't know why Nintendo decided to talk about it now, but that Nintendo has vindicated my entire stance on this. Now, obviously, there's something to say that, I'm choosing to believe what Nintendo says on this. Obviously, you could argue it's still a bunch of hogwash, and Nintendo's purposely shorting the Switch to keep driving up demand. But I just don't think that's the case, because it's one thing to short it just short of what demand is in order to keep that demand going. They are shortening it by a significant margin. When you're having thousands upon thousands of people line up daily, weekly, whatever it is in Japan for a lottery, that lets you know that Nintendo's not trying to short it, at least, especially not trying to short it that badly. They are leaving so much money on the table doing that. Even if they wanted to keep it sold out, they would still try to hit, somewhere close to just under what the demand actually is to keep it sold out, but still sell a crap load of units. So, as I've said all along, Nintendo does have a really bad history of being short on products. Amiibo is obviously one we dealt with this past generation. Just even to this day, there are Breath of the Wild Amiibo that have never been restocked. And here's the thing. Nintendo had a problem stocking the Wii. Now, it was easy to argue back then and easy to defend Nintendo, because Nintendo hadn't developed a long-standing history of shorting things, right? So the GameCube sold like crap, so they obviously, with a Wii, the Wii had very bad critical reception heading into launch. The reception at least among video game websites, was not very good. There was not a lot of hype for Wii. And yet it blew up. It was completely unplanned, and you could see why Nintendo struggled for a couple years to get the thing sold 100 million units. Nintendo, they sold most of those units in a 3-year span. So Nintendo was pushing 30 million units a year out. That's really hard to keep up with demand. So the demand for that was obviously at a point where you could understand where Nintendo, especially coming off the GameCube era and not having any other massive successes of that scale basically ever, and plus with the huge success of the DS at the time, that Nintendo was going to fall behind. But here we are today, and we just suffered shortages with the NES Classic, and then Nintendo just stopped making it. I understand it was always intended to be a limited run holiday item, and in general, I don't actually think there's anything wrong with limited run items, as long as there is sufficient stock, because if it's a limited run item, it's okay to make like 10 million of them, because if it's limited run, that means you're never making anymore, and you can just leave them sitting on store shelves for years until all the stock sells out. So that's kind of why I don't have an issue with limited run items, but Nintendo should have made more NES Classics. And you would figure they learned from the NES Classic situation with the SNES Classic situation. After all, Nintendo, the same Nintendo that is saying that Apple is one of the huge reasons why they don't have enough Switches on the market, they are saying that they did better with the SNES Classic situation. And maybe they have. They definitely didn't do better with pre-orders. They definitely didn't tell retailers, or retailers just chose not to listen, tell retailers to give people a warning and a time for when these things were going to be available to pre-order, which I know some people say, oh, that also lets scalpers know. Yeah, but do professional level scalpers have tracking algorithms and programs running all the time that most general consumers that really want these things are not running? So they're going to become aware of it anyways, regardless. So they might as well have just let everyone know what time these pre-orders were going to go live. So the pre-orders were still botched with the NES Classic Edition. Now, we don't know what the final tally is going to be. They said there's going to be significantly more of these than there's going to be for the NES Classic situation. Nintendo has kind of come out and said, hey, the SNES Classic is actually in more demand than the NES Classic was. And I'm not too surprised. The SNES Classic has a game on it that never fully released publicly in Star Fox 2. That's going to generate a lot of hype right there and make people feel like it's worth $80 on its own. Plus, it just has an amazing library of 21 games. It's really hard to argue, even at $79.99, the value of getting all those games plus Star Fox 2. Just awesome. And I mean, heck, it's got Secret of Mana, and there's a Secret of Mana remake happening that Nintendo Switch isn't getting. I don't know what's up with that. I'm guessing Sony paid some money for console exclusivity. I don't know, because Xbox isn't getting it either. Anyways, but moving beyond all that, we have to look at this situation on its own. and realized that while the SNES Classic might be shorted, and the NES Classic might have been shorted originally on purpose, and then eventually they realized, man, demand is so high for this thing, we just can't keep up, and then they just cut their losses and moved on to the SNES Classic and amiibo issues. I think that Nintendo, you know, they've always viewed themselves as a toy maker, and a common toy making practice around holiday seasons is to purposely short items to increase demand. This is what we've seen happen with Tickle Me Elmo and certain Barbie dolls and certain American Girl dolls and all these things. They shorten the demand to increase it, and then, you know, when the deal period is over, right? Because usually there's deals on some of these items during the holidays. When you get past the holidays, the demand for those items is still there, and then when people are returning their items or they have gift cards, the following January and February, when these items get restocked at a slightly higher price, they sell that stock and make more money off it. It's actually a kind of a smart business move, even if it's, I guess, anti-consumer in some ways, but that's just capitalism. That's how it works in the United States. I don't think that this is what Nintendo does worldwide, because that's really a United States kind of thing. Nintendo is not purposely shorting stores in Japan. They're not purposely shorting stores in Europe. They could be doing it in the United States, but it's highly doubtful. Especially if you look at the sales numbers. I mean, the sales numbers of the Switch are right up there with PlayStation 4 every single month, and there's plenty of PlayStation 4s on the shelves. So if Nintendo could actually keep the Switch in stock, it would readily and handily be outselling the PlayStation 4 all year long so far this year. So it's just... It's one of those things where Nintendo isn't doing this on purpose, and now we know from the horse's mouth, not just a rumor coming from manufacturers that they're having issues, from Nintendo's own mouth, they are saying they're having a hard time getting the components for the Nintendo Switch from all these different companies that make them, because of companies like Apple, which was brought up specifically, companies that run data centers, and several other products, which will probably include other smart devices that are also in demand for these products. And NAND flash, we already know Apple and other companies have reported that there's worldwide shortages on things like NAND flash, which is what the 32 gigs of memory is inside of the Switch, and is really the only viable option for a tablet-like device anyways. And yeah, Nintendo's having a hard time getting a hold of that, and obviously some other parts we've heard reported. Again, the HD Rumble, some of the components of that are hard to get a hold of. So it's not just... Nintendo is basically saying it's easy to ramp up the factories to make more Switches. That's not the issue. There are two issues. One, when the factories are ramped up, they're having a hard time getting the shipments out quick enough. And I think that's what we saw a couple weeks ago when like every single retailer in the United States suddenly had, you know, a handful or more of Switch units available. That's because Nintendo got a massive shipment on the boats, had it arrive at some point, probably a week prior, and was able to restock everything at once. That's where you might be talking about hard, you know, shipping issues are just a thing that's going to happen as you're increasing and ramping things up, because you're not just going to send them out immediately as they're done. You're going to, you know, bank up enough of them to make sending a boat worthwhile. And they obviously had a huge boat full of Nintendo Switches arrive. That's why we saw that huge restock a couple weeks ago. And then you look at now, you know, they said the other issue is just getting those parts, and it's something that we need to be more understanding of as consumers, not just as Nintendo fans, just as consumers, because I understand any and all reasons that people get frustrated with Nintendo products being short on the market. I understand it. I'm just as frustrated with you. I own a Nintendo Switch, and I still feel for you, because I want a second one. I want to get my daughter one for Christmas. I love the Switch. I think it is something that my whole family, including my fiance, would love to have their very own version of, with the games they want to play. I know for a fact that my fiance would love to have Puyo Puyo Tetris, and she wants Mario Kart and all these games. She would love to be able to play it by herself and not have to fight for time with me, because I'm always using it for work. I'm trying to review Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle this week, and you know, I'm playing a ton of that. No one else gets to play on my Switch. It's just a frustrating situation, and I understand your frustrations. We just need to understand that there's only so much Nintendo can do about it. Whew! Nintendo Switch. We just gotta wait. Just gotta wait and be patient. Anyways, folks, I'm Nathaniel Rufflegents from Nintendo Prime. If you like this video, you know what to do. And if you dislike this video, hit that dislike button. Subscribe for more. And as always, folks, I will catch you in the next one.